I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Welcome to the Q&A, everyone. I guess we have a lot of questions, don't we, today, Tom?
We do. And excellent questions. I want to thank everybody because this is what really keeps our topic alive and going. And when you ask a question, you're asking a question that possibly hundreds of other people may have, considering the number of people that listen to the show. I want to say thank you for the questions. And if you like the show, let us know, like and subscribe. It feeds the algorithm. And we don't know much about the algorithm. We just know that it's hungry and wants to be fed. And if you like to support the show, you can do that. We've got a link to Patreon, and that's another hungry algorithm beast. So with that said, we're going to jump right in. And I'm going to start off with two questions here. The first one is, this is from Danny in the Southern Sierras. Danny wants to know if a optical zoom is preferable, better quality than a digital zoom on a digital camera. And I'd say only by about 100%. Much better. The digital zoom, it's a great way to, it's a cheap zoom. It'll pixelate things. If you want a good picture, go with the optical. So good question. Thanks, Danny. And Danny's got another question, and this is more directed for Will. Will has said that Sasquatch tend to go up in elevation with the onset of winter. So why would they do this? Are they following game? And if so, is this a pattern that the game would do? Is this something that the game would? Do they go into the higher elevations?
The reasons they do it, of course, are unknown. We can't know unless we follow them around all the time, and see what they're doing. But it is something they seem to do. Now, whether it's just a preference, they prefer the colder weather or not, that's unknown. But one thing is they do stay above the game, and whether the game animals are going up there or not, they like to be above the game animals. Mostly it's because they want to stay upwind of them. So, but they prefer the high ground, and staying above the game seems to make sense. What do you think, Forrest?
Well, I was just thinking about that. Maybe by staying upwind of them, and they're not staying on the same level, if they were on the same level with them and the game was always smelling them, or had the possibility of smelling them, it might even drive them farther down into maybe populated areas where, of course, Bigfoot wouldn't want to be having to go.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a very strategic reason. Of course, they don't want to spook the game out of an area too soon, because once they know a major predator's in the area, they'll leave.
Well, it's kind of like when when hunting season comes, where do you find all the deer, the elk, and not so much moose?
Down where you can't shoot them.
Yeah, down where you can't shoot them. I mean, they're not, they may not be the brightest animals in the world, but they're not the stupidest either. So, they're going to go where you're not going to be able to get to them.
Exactly.
And I've often wondered about how do they know? I mean, I'm positive they don't read the newspaper. I'm positive they don't read, the internet, but somehow they know. And I've watched.
It's uncanny, isn't it?
It is so uncanny.
It's like within a day of opening season, they're hanging around small towns that are out in the wild areas or people's homes. They're where you wouldn't think they would be.
I have seen that time and again, time and again. I'll go up into the mountains, and it's the same, as far as I can tell, same number of people going up in the mountains. It's just different. You got backpackers, hikers, and campers, and that doesn't seem to drive them down. But maybe it's the sound of the first rifle shot. And you're like, oh yeah. But I've often watched elk on an opposite ravine, and depending on the time of day, well, I'm talking about in the morning when you get those thermals coming up, they pick up your scent and bam, they get up and they're on the move now.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So they're, I think we need to give animals a lot more credit for being intelligent, or at least having some good instincts.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when the Sasquatch are doing what they do, they're aware of what the animals are doing, so they're going to adjust accordingly.
Oh, yeah. And they're aware of what we're doing, too. I think they're far more intelligent as far as, well, we can go on and on about this, but I mean, you can get very close to these creatures and have absolutely no clue that you're being spied on. Okay. Here's a question from Desmond. He says, hey guys, are there any reliable stories of hunters needing to shoot at Bigfoot due to a threatening behavior? And how did they escape or stop it? What kind of rifle is needed to stop these creatures, given their size, etc.? And then there's a second half, but we'll answer the first half first.
Okay. There are stories, plenty of stories of them being shot at. I've interviewed people that have shot at them. One in particular during hunting season, and I've told this before. I don't know why it's not a particular standout story. It's just the one that comes to mind all the time because I knew that area really well. And the guy was deer hunting, and I think he had a 30-06. Saw the creature down this road, and I think it was across a ravine. It was kind of a switchback situation. And he saw the creature at some, couple hundred yards away, and he shot the thing. He says he hit it in the right shoulder, and basically it just kept going. It didn't just, it left the scene. It didn't take off running, but it left quickly. But it didn't go down, and he wasn't even sure why he shot it himself. But there are plenty of those cases. Well,
and there's a story that Joe told us, a year and a half ago, a couple years ago, about a camp that he and a friend of his found in the Oregon Cascades. That was an abandoned camp, and a lot of very expensive equipment left there. But the place was littered. He said the ground was just littered with 5.56 shell casings all over the place. So,
and that's way too small around to be shooting at a Sasquatch with.
Oh, way too small. And you got to wonder what happened to the occupants of that camp.
It's one of the things I always say is don't shoot at one. If you should be able to, they're going to give you signs that they don't want you in the area. And if you do encounter one that doesn't give one of the signs, like, the lip flip or throwing something at you, things like that, just leave. Go back the way you came and leave. Because you don't want a situation to turn bad.
Absolutely. Okay, and the second half of this question is, this Desmond wants to know, if being seen with a gun is better than not having one encountering these creatures. In other words, do they know what a gun is, and would that be a deterrent?
Well, apparently they do. I know in my own first encounter, I was holding a rifle. And, looking back, I didn't think about it at the moment because it was only a .22, but it was a rifle. And I'm sure, I think the creature was aware of what it was. Because it didn't make any moves. It didn't do anything. And I left quickly when the second creature come around after I shot in the air. So, what do you think, Forrest? I mean, and Milo, join in too.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're smart enough to recognize, the damage that rifles do. I mean, I know for a fact that you can pick up a rifle and look through the scope, just using it for the scope, because we've done it around here before, at deer that are in the pasture. You know, we had a big buck that kept coming up here, and we would just look at him through the scope, my daughter and me, and you know, as soon as I brought that rifle up, I mean, he saw us and was just watching us. And as soon as I brought that rifle up to look at him, and this is a freaking deer, and he was gone. So, I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of animals recognize those as weapons of doom. So, you know, I don't think it's necessarily just something that Bigfoot do, but of course a Bigfoot's going to have far greater intelligence, a level of intelligence than a deer or a coyote or something like that. But all animals seem to recognize that if they've ever been shot at, they seem to recognize that, you know, guns are bad.
Yeah, I would think if they saw, you know, a human killing a deer or something with a rifle, that would probably stick with them. So if they saw that particular item again, you know, they would have some concept of what it does.
Yeah.
Okay. And we know the question of this. This is the last part of the same question from Desmond. He says, also wondering if Bigfoot ever leaves fingerprints, and how similar are those to humans or apes? Could fingerprints be useful in identifying species or individuals?
Well, the first part of that, do they leave fingerprints? That's yes. We actually have pictures of that. So, a number of them. But
they're grubby prints too.
A what?
They're grubby prints.
The grubby prints, yeah. But as far as usefulness,
I had them on my truck one time.
That's right. Yours are one of them. I have, like I said, I have a number of photos in my my files of these kind of markings. So, as far as usefulness, wouldn't do much good really, because excuse me. You know, there's no database for Bigfoot fingerprints, so you wouldn't be able to identify one.
No, there's no CODIS base for them.
Right.
If I might make a suggestion, if this individual, Desmond, did you say was the person that asked the question? There's actually a man from, and if I remember correctly, I think Jimmy Chilkoff was considered to be one of the foremost authorities on fingerprinting. And he is from Texas, of course, and I think actually down in the Houston area. Katy,
yeah, he
possibly.
was an FBI agent.
Was he an FBI agent as well? Okay. But he actually got bored and decided he was going to see if primates had the same type of fingerprint pads as humans do. And he has done the most extensive work on, I think there's not a primate known to man that he has not printed and cataloged. And you need to check his work out, because actually I know Jeff Meldrum has used him, and when they have found, pad prints, or hand prints, and that they cast, and you can pull off they do have fingerprints just like what we do, and they are exclusively just like an individual human. They are individual to the that particular primate as well, and they're different from they're all different. So they have each animal's fingerprint is exclusive to that particular animal. So you could, if you had a fingerprint system like CODIS, I guess we could enter them into, but unfortunately there aren't too many volunteer Bigfoot out there ready to put their fingerprints in the system. So
it's so few and far between. It really wouldn't be of much use, though.
Yeah, but you might look him up, and he actually there is some stuff on out there on the internet that explains a lot of his work, and it's quite interesting actually.
All right. So next question is, what signs do Bigfoot leave marking their territory? And what can people look for to better recognize these signs? I wonder if people are unwittingly missing these signs and wandering into areas that could easily be avoided. And I think we know the answer to that.
Yeah, we have answered this before a few times, but we'll, because people don't always listen to the show, we'll say it again. Typically, what they do is you'll either see a 90-degree break or the trunk of the tree is twisted. And it's something that people would just walk by because they would think if they even looked at a tree like that, they would just think it was weather damage.
And I will say this. I ran into a tree trunk that I sent you a picture of 4 years ago, I think. And it was, I don't know, 20, 30 yards away. So I just took a close-up picture of it, and you said, go back and check the ground. Oh, yeah, good idea. And it was absolutely everywhere. There was these 14, 15-inch footprints all over the place. So that would be a dead giveaway. Right
Usually,
there.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent question.
So that's the main marking they do, though.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Got a question. This is from Mike. He wants to know what could be the reason for the wheezing, rattling noise coming from what is presumed to be these creatures breathing when somebody's having an encounter.
I don't know. I mean, I've only heard people say that a couple of times. Most of the time they don't. My own encounter close up, I didn't hear anything like that. Any thoughts, Forrest?
Did I understand that right? That they're hearing a rattling noise when they're breathing?
Kind of I've heard it.
Rasping or something?
Yeah, a few times where it's
okay. Yeah.
kind of a
No,
raspy, like they've got
Yeah.
bronchitis or something.
Yeah. Well, that's not a normal sound that other primates would make, and I would think that if I heard something like that it would be an indication to me that there might be some upper respiratory problems going on. Primates are susceptible to a lot of the same diseases that we are. And I've wondered sometimes with all this COVID outbreak that, and other things, people going into the woods and possibly spreading types of respiratory problems that maybe they contracted. I don't know. I don't have one to study, so I couldn't answer that question. But that would be my guess, that would be a upper respiratory problem. That is not normal to hear, raspy, heavy breathing coming from any primate. It'd be just like with a person. It'd be an indication that there might be something going on that's not right.
And especially since that's not the norm with encounters.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so here's a question. Obviously, we know that Sasquatch can move about really good at night. And this guy says, in my opinion, I would say that with all the reports of them having orange and red glowing eyes, maybe it's an adaptation over thousands of years, some sort of evolutionary process so that they've developed some sort of night vision. What are your thoughts on this, Will and Forrest?
I can take that.
Sure.
Okay, humans gave up night vision so that we could detect more colors. That's the same with most primates. Now, there are some primates, your lemurs, your prosimians, and the lower orders. It's only in the lower orders of simians. And they do, I go back to the tapetum lucidum, which is that reflective material in your eyes or in the eyes of mammals that causes their eyes to be reflective when they're hit with a light. Primates don't possess that. Humans don't possess that. When you see a red eye, people say, "Oh, well, people have red eyes," and you see that in photographs and stuff. Well, that's true, but what's happening is that that's the blood. The blood in the back of the eye is actually picking up the light. That's what it's hitting, and it's seeing all those blood vessels in the back of the eye, and that's why you get the red eye in pictures. It's not because that people have suddenly acquired, tapetum lucidum in their eyes. But I suspect with a lot of the different, I've said over and over that Bigfoot seems to be a bit of an enigma because they seem to have retained some primitive features, like the mid-tarsal break in the foot, and yet they still have an inline toe. Why couldn't they have, on the same token, retained this tapetum lucidum in their eyes so that would make them more likely to be hunting at night and more nocturnal? And that's not to say I don't think that, because people see them out during the day. I think I've seen them out during the day hunting as well.
Yeah,
so,
they're equal. They're equally.
I think they could equally at home either way. But I would say that if that's the case, then they obviously must possess that ability in their eyes that they can operate nocturnally. And that certainly puts them at the advantage and us at a disadvantage, because we like that.
Here's the thought, too. It made me think of the Bob Titmus story, that when he was in the Bluff Creek area, not far from the Patterson film site, actually a few years before Patterson got the film, and he had to bed down there because he was afraid of getting injured trying to go out with no light through the woods at night. And the creature showed up around 1 a.m. If they had really good night vision, I think it might have found him, but it didn't. It could smell that he was there but couldn't find him and threw a tantrum. So it kind of, and here's another thought that goes with that is typically they seem to be more active right around dusk and dawn, and not quite so much in the middle of the night. So maybe the night vision isn't 100% developed.
Yeah, well, that's always a possibility. And now, didn't he dig a depression and then cover himself up with
all but his face? The stuff on the forest floor, sure.
And the thing that I found strange too about that story was that he said he could hear I think he thought it was the same female too that was in the Patterson film. Am I correct about that?
That was based on the footprints. Yeah, the footprints matched.
Yeah.
Once Patterson got the film, it was the same creature.
That he heard her sniffing in the air, and then you will hear that sometimes that people discuss that you see them.
It's a common feature.
Sniffing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you that the olfactory sense in most primates is not a highly developed feature. So again, I go back to the same old thing. I think that Bigfoot is an enigma. It has retained, there are certain things that it has retained that we wouldn't find in even modern day primates now.
I'll tell you something though about the sense of smell. And Milo you'll know this too. When we were in the military, when you are going to go on a patrol, you have to prep yourself. You get your night vision, and you want to have kind of erase the smell on you, and you can smell. The longer you're out, your sense of smell becomes heightened. You can smell people.
Well, and I wouldn't necessarily deny that, but it's not an advanced feature in humans at all. It's not something that we've lost the ability to use it. I would think that there are tribes, your primitive tribes, that do use that because they've had to. They've been forced to in hunting situations. However, it is not to the extent that it is in other mammals. I mean, to compare even primitive people's abilities to smell things as even compared to maybe the animal that they're hunting, it's not even going to be on the same level, because first off, you've got an animal that's got all that prognatism, which is the length of the muzzle, gives them that helps with and heightens the ability of smell. We lack that. We got a flat face.
But there's a
most primates.
But there's a flip side to that too.
Have a flat face. What's that?
The flip, when I took my sight courses, they talked about this, because everybody uses the example of a dog. You know how superior the sense of smell of dog is compared to a human. That's true, but they can only identify maybe a dozen scents, where the human mind can identify 50,000.
Well, and you've got the problem there being is that yes, the identification. But the ability to necessarily go out in the woods and smell that is an entirely different issue. It's like we have certain features within our brain that allows us to. That's why when you smell a cologne, somebody can walk past you and you can smell like cologne, and all of a sudden your brain goes, oh, that's what my grandmother used to wear all the time.
Right.
Or oh, you smell cookies, and all of a sudden you're seeing visions of your mother preparing, chocolate chip cookies when you're a child. See, we have that ability, and that's not to say that other animals don't have that ability. They don't have any way to convey that idea to us.
I would think a Sasquatch might use some of that sense of smell to aid the other senses, like in a situation like that one, let's say that, it couldn't see as well, especially in a dark forested area at night. And people wear deodorant and things like that. And Titmus smoked, so maybe it smelled cigarette smoke.
Oh, yeah.
And knew that there was a human there somewhere.
Well, that's what I'm saying is they obviously have had some sort of primitive retention of that olfactory sense of smell, that we have lost. And I think that ability is far greater than anything that we have. That's not to say that you can't, people say, oh, well, you smell them. Well, that's not quite the same as scenting something, because, there's lots of things that your dog will smell, and you're standing there going, I don't smell what the dog, and you can see the dog sniff in the air, and you have no idea what he's smelling, but he is picking up a scent of something, and so we lack that ability. But I think that in some respects that from the stories that I've heard, I would think that Bigfoot has retained that ability.
Yeah, I would think so. Tom, what do we got next?
Okay, so Annie wants to know, she says, there's a question from episode 172 that Will was talking about sending a photograph to Forrest. It was a photograph of footprint from a type 4 creatures that hunters had taken, so that would be the Minnesota Iceman. What Annie wants to know is whether the footprints were inline or staggered. Will says the footprints were human-like, and so I think where she's going with this is maybe this was, some sort of a proto, I don't know, I wouldn't say proto-human, but, were they staggered or were they?
I don't know. The hunters, it was moose hunters who found the tracks way up in the middle of nowhere, and they were very good tracks. They didn't say if they were inline, and they never responded when I asked. It was a kind of a one-off thing. They sent me the information, and I never heard back from them, so we don't know.
Okay. Well, that would be interesting. That is a very observant question, so thank you, Annie. Okay, so this one is, this guy likes the weekly podcasts as well as the midweek edition, so thank you. Okay, so this one is, I really do not know how so many evidence was written down at the time, pioneers and trailblazers who overcame the ridicule and criticism. Okay, so this question is, on Bigfoot prints, why are they different from humans' footprints, for example? Are they set at a different angle from ours? Do they have what is termed a longitudinal arch? What can you comment about why they're different? I have some pretty good ideas, but they
Well,
superficially resemble us. That's
yeah,
best.
the superficial, but you're talking. The first thing is size. That's why, back in the late 50s, the term Bigfoot was coined, and it was because Jerry Crew made the comment with a reporter. I think it was Andrew Gonzalez was the guy who coined the term. They were looking at some prints around his equipment one of the times that he found them, and Crew made the comment. He says that fella sure has big feet. So the reporter picked that up as the line for the story, and it caught on. So human footprints compared to a Sasquatch tracks are much different in size, much smaller. The average Sasquatch track, the adults range anywhere from 13 to, on average, up to 18, 19 inches long. There have been some that are bigger, but typically that's the range for adults. And most common, it's 15 or 16 inches. That's kind of the most common length of a footprint. Human footprints are nothing like that, but as far as they're typically flat-footed, no arch. Although I have a set of prints that were, cast by a deputy sheriff, and a couple of those prints do appear to have an arch. Although that could be just simply the way, whatever the creature was walking over at the moment, for those particular prints, because some of the other tracks are flat; they're not no arch at all. And Forrest, of course, you could probably talk more on footprints.
Yeah. Bigfoot completely lacks a longitudinal arch. We have those. They don't. They exhibit the mid-tarsal break in the foot, which I don't know if people understand what I'm saying when I say a mid-tarsal break. That's kind of like the fact that your hand can fold over, and if you've noticed in primates' feet that they can fold their feet over like they do their hands. And that is a physical adaptation to climbing. Bigfoot seems to have retained that, so that's why I say Bigfoot probably do a lot more climbing than we probably think that they do. From what I understand on the prints, and I actually just recently watched a real interesting program that Meldrum did on tracks, and there seems to be the denotation that there's padding on their feet as well, and they have their dermal ridges run lengthwise along the side of their foot. Ours do not do that. Ours actually run across the foot. And you don't see that in any of human or even non-human primates, the ridges running lengthwise on the foot. So they exhibit a different features in their feet than what we have. Now, the one thing that I did notice that, and of course not having a skeleton to look at, but the way it was explained is that it seems that the actual large tarsals in the foot, which would be the ankle placement, it seems that is set forward. Our heel is, right, our leg ties into our heel right at the back of our foot. And theirs doesn't seem to do that. There seems to be a more forward placement of that leg bone in there, which I'm thinking that would be that way because of the heavier weight of the animal versus what we have. You don't even see that in other, primates. So I don't. That's an extremely unusual feature. So I'm thinking that that's probably an adaptation that they have come along with because of the size and their structure, for support. But there seems to be padding on their feet as well, and which that would make sense.
Very
like a pad,
thick.
just like a dog or a cat, has. That have to have it to get through the terrain that they get through. So,
Well, let me ask you this. This is for the two of you. Are there other primates' footprints? This is a further question that he has. Are there other footprints at different angles from humans and would be maybe similar to the Bigfoot?
No, not really, because primates, the primate foot, and this is all the way through to your great apes, your when I say great apes, that includes your gibbons, your orangutans, your chimps, your gorillas, all the way down to your lower order simians and prosimians. They exhibit an opposable big toe, which is just like their feet look just like their hands. They've got that toe that is very offset and down lower, and that is because they're climbing animals, and they climb, and some more than others, but they still have retained that. Now, I will say this, that there have been some prints that have come in from like the up in Nepal on the Yeti, and the Yeti prints seem to have a more slight offset in the footprints than what occurs in our Bigfoot and even some of the other sightings that you get across the world, like your Yeti and not Yeti, but the Yowies and Almas and everything. But the Yeti seems to have a slightly more primitive feature in their foot than what we see in ours over here in North America and the rest of the world.
Well, is it possible that humans once had this before they became more modern and never needed to climb trees? Do you think it's possible we had that and we just kind of lost it over time without having the need to climb trees?
Well, sure. And I mean, and they are finding this all the time that, Australopithecus had a foot just like ours. So we're looking at an animal that's, 6 million years ago that had a foot just like ours. This new discovery of the Orion ape, they have exhibit a inline foot as well. So there is the less arboreal and the more time they spend on the ground, you're going to develop a foot that is more suitable for running rather than climbing. So, I mean, that's exactly what our foot is suitable for, is walking long distances and climbing. And of course, along with that, you're going to see pelvic, a change in the pelvic structure. I mean, you look at all the apes and monkeys, their pelvis is designed for quadrupedal walking, not bipedal. I mean, yes, they can get up and walk bipedally, but not for long distances. So by virtue of that fact, Bigfoot is going to have a femur head and a pelvic structure very similar to a human's. And like I always say, Bigfoot, babies got back because they got to have a butt. And if you notice in all primates other than man, they don't have butts. And you've got to have that big glute back there for those muscles to provide you that ability to do a lot of walking.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, next question is, do you have an idea what percent of Bigfoot calories come from meat versus plant material?
Well, it would have to be the majority would come from meat because it takes a lot of protein to drive a large brain.
Okay, so do you think they're primarily meat eaters with some plants during appropriate seasons, or more like a bear, which is mainly vegetarian with opportunistic hunting of meat?
Well, a bear will eat just about anything, so it's not really a vegetarian. I mean, they'll eat a great deal of meat. They'll eat whatever they can get a hold of. But a Sasquatch, and we know this from, of course, witness reports of them killing animals and hunters having deer taken from them. But you think about what's out there. There isn't enough vegetable material to eat year-round, especially in the Pacific Northwest. The leaves and everything are off the trees, and a lot of these leafy-type plants are dead for the winter. They'd starve to death if they were vegetarian. So needing to drive that large brain and to fuel it, and the availability of different kinds of food. There's more, animals around to eat than there is plants.
Okay, so this goes into he's got some other questions here. He says, are they primarily big animal hunters, deer and moose, or more like small animals like rodents, rabbits, etc.? And do you have any idea if they lose weight during the winter months annually? And has anybody noted that a Bigfoot sighted in the winter often appears skinny, like starving?
I know people.
We know the answer.
I know people that have seen them in the springtime, and sometimes they look emaciated, but other times not. So it really depends, I suppose, on the individuals and on how well they are or how good they are at, feeding themselves. Maybe some that are emaciated in the spring aren't very good hunters, and just didn't do very well through the winter, while other ones that are, not fazed by it or have become very good at what they do.
Well, and you think about the story from Union Creek. They were very tall. They were very lean.
Mm-hmm.
There was a group of them, and it was like, we're going to supplement our diet here and now.
I don't think that was supplement. I think that was a primary. That wasn't a supplement.
Primary diet, absolutely.
Well, wouldn't that be like opportunistic, or they come across it and said, like, ooh, that's the way I look at it.
Oh, we're not hearing you, Milo. Your volume cut out, Milo. I think he asked.
We lost him.
I think he asked if they were opportunistic, but yeah, that's absolutely. Let me see if I can find him. Oh no, he's here.
All right, last part of this question, and hopefully we can get Milo back.
Yeah, let me text him.
What do you think of the stories about Sasquatch speaking with Indians? And that would be basically, say, talking with anybody, but do you think do they know the Indian words or some English words?
That's a good question. It's an unknown. They may recognize some things if it's been said often enough, I suppose, depending on the situation, but
yeah, we had Gerald on a while back, and he talked about there was a mimicking. He wasn't there, but his former boss, the police chief, and somebody else were out in the woods, and they kept hearing Gerald talking, and he was nowhere around. So,
well, mimicking and knowing words are two different things, though.
Right, exactly.
That's completely different. It's really tough to say. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have to answer that. I don't know.
Well, I think it would be just like any animals that, you say a word around, like a cat or a dog even enough that they'll learn to recognize what that word means. Gosh, I'm probably going to offend a lot of people out there that think that Bigfoot are next to human, but I just don't see Bigfoot sitting down and having conversations with anybody.
No, I don't either.
But I could be wrong.
And
I'm always
for them to understand. Okay, I guess we're using a blanket term here. If we're talking about all Sasquatches out there, for them to understand words, they would have to be taught languages, and it would have to be across, the species.
Well, exactly, and even the apes that have learned languages, there have been chimpanzees that have learned to communicate with computers, but they are taught what the symbols mean, and it's like Coco that learned the American Sign Language. She had to be taught what those words mean. She didn't just come with a full-blown knowledge of them.
Right.
Now,
And
they will, people that have worked out in the wild with feral chimps, feral apes, feral gorillas on any level will say that, all of them have hand signals and certain sounds that they make that has a meaning to that particular group. And so they obviously have means of communication amongst themselves, but being able to, I haven't seen any chimpanzees or gorillas sitting down and having conversations with humans without having been taught how to communicate with humans.
Yeah, the signals that
We're taught.
Oh, go ahead, Milo.
We're taught.
Yeah, the signals that one group...
We're taught the same thing. I mean, if we were set alone by ourselves, we wouldn't know how to talk.
No.
No, in fact, aren't there cases of feral people that had a really difficult time being taught how to speak? And I think there were a couple of cases where they couldn't be taught how to speak.
Yes, they've had several instances throughout history where kids have actually been raised in the wild, oftentimes by other species of animals. That is not unheard of, but they aren't able to communicate because those formative years that you have and need to have when you're young to learn all the language, it makes it extremely difficult for them to, pick up a language and even learn how to communicate in later years.
Yeah, those neural pathways wouldn't have developed. And that's very important to understand, too. If that part of your brain, those neural pathways, aren't developed through those experiences, in other words, when you learn how to read and speak and things like that, we learn to do those things over and over and over. It's repetitive. So that's how those pathways are built. So if you don't have that, you're not going to develop those neural pathways.
Exactly.
Just quick comment on that. There's a psychologist that wrote a book on that about how, the over-dependence on, we're not going to use anybody's search engine name. It starts with G, but an over-dependence on rapid answers through the internet or on your phone actually causes those neural pathways to atrophy. And when you have to struggle and work hard to memorize and pick up new concepts, you're building new neural pathways. But that typically comes from reading books and not getting those instant answers.
Right.
Well, this is a prime example. You look at kids nowadays and their ability to use language. I'm mortified because you have kids that cannot communicate, they cannot write, they want to do everything phonetically like they do on their, phones and their computers, but for them to sit down and write, I mean, some of the greatest communications throughout history have been letters and by human beings, just letters. And so I find it really abhorrent the way kids are today, and it's maybe they should have had a mother like mine. I was a latchkey kid, and most people probably don't even know what that is. But my mother, when I came home from school, I literally locked myself in the house until she got home. And I was always one of these kids that was who, what, when, where, why, and I still am to a certain degree, even though I'm not a child anymore. And my mother one time told me, I bought you a set of encyclopedias, Britannicas. Go look it up. So you know what I did? I did. And I would come home every afternoon and read the frickin' encyclopedia. And, to this day, I'm great to take to a Trivial Pursuit game. But I have a fountain of useless knowledge in my brain. But you know what? There's a lot of kids nowadays. There's a lot of kids nowadays that should have a fountain of useless knowledge in their brains. And I think that therein is, don't even get me started talking about the educational system.
Oh, it's tragic.
Anyway.
It's tragic. You see videos on YouTube where people go out and they'll ask people simple questions. I think it started from the Tonight Show doing it, or one of those shows.
Oh yeah.
And Jay Leno used to do it.
It's painful.
And it is, because people, it just makes you think people are just stupid, but they're not.
Yeah,
they don't know things.
I sat and watched Jesse Waters do one last night, and I was just like, oh my God, are people really still that stupid? And I was like, that's a rhetorical question, okay?
Well, it's because they don't go learn things like we used to. Everything is it's on their phone, and what gets me too is
taught.
It's
not taught anymore.
Right. Yeah, and there's
cursive isn't taught anymore.
Right.
I mean, my wife is a parrot teacher in our school district, and the stuff that if the kid doesn't want to do it, they don't have to do it.
And nothing is edited.
That actually didn't work out so well when I was in school as a kid. It didn't matter if you wanted to do it or not.
And it's bad. Even some, like, the big news organizations, newspapers and things don't edit articles anymore. Sometimes I look at something and think, geez, did a foreigner write this? It's awful.
Really? Yeah.
But that's
I've watched kids
pass
math classes with like doing calculus with copy and paste.
Okay. So.
I'm like, oh no, you don't learn calculus that way. No, you don't learn any kind of math that way.
So getting back to Bigfoot.
Back to Bigfoot, yeah. We're gonna have to edit some of this out.
No, we'll leave it in. Let's go on to the next question, Tom.
Okay, so I noticed a famous Patty picture in the Bigfoot females, at least, have prominent visible breasts. I'm under the impression that this is unusual in that other primates don't have prominent breasts, and it's a sexually selected signal only in humans. Okay, so I was wondering, do all Bigfoot females have noticeable breasts, or is it only the type 1s?
Well, here's what I think, again, you can't make a generalization about that one. That one could have been nursing, for all we know, because I've had other witnesses tell me they've seen females, but the breasts apparently had no milk in them, which I think is what you would expect in the wild.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. All primates will have easy for me to say, noticeable breasts if they are nursing. Now, when they're not nursing, you may have older females that have had, that have been nursing for a while, and they will have breasts. They will be, basically limp. They won't be full, but they'll have breasts. And you'll see, enlarged nipples on them because they've been nursing, infants throughout their years. But that's what I totally agree with you, that I think Patty was a nursing female because she had quite enlarged mammary glands. So
people jumped to
I'm going to say this.
Yeah, people jumped to conclusions.
That was a nursing female.
People jumped to conclusions in the past that there was a juvenile there. There was no sign of one there, but there must have been one, at least in the general area somewhere.
Because
go ahead, Milo.
Oh no, it's just she was a female. We're talking about the Patterson film, right?
Right.
Yeah, I would assume so. It would have to be out there and where she's like scoping, make sure it's safe, and it's just being hidden or watching. But I had a question about when primates, when they have their do they have like a reoccurring nursery where they do it all the time, or is it have? I might say no. Do they always go back to the same place to have their births and stuff like that?
No.
It's kind of like wherever they are, that's it.
That's usually the way it is. That's the way I've seen it. And it's like wherever they are. Like chimps will usually, I think I've said this before, that the female chimps will usually go off into the forest to had their babies, and that's, I think, due to the problems with the male chimps and the things that they do. You don't have that issue with the gorillas. Gorillas don't attack and eat and consume their young. Neither do macaques, and I've actually never seen it in any other ape except the baboons. The baboons are terrible about it, but if they can grab an infant, they will eat them. But usually, it's just like once the labor pains set in, that's pretty much, they'll either stay in that area or they'll go to a comfortable place that they can have the infant. And a lot of times it'll be in the tree, and I think it has to do with the fact that just gravity helps them out there. They can sit in the tree, and actually it's very unique the way they can reach around and pull that infant, and that infant is literally pulled up between their legs immediately, and they start cleaning it, and they won't even pass the afterbirth yet, and they'll start cleaning that infant and stimulating it to try to get it to, and position it so that it'll start nursing.
I have a comment too. If a Sasquatch were using the same area to birth, it would draw predators.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get to, is because everything's like seasonal, right? I mean, for like, or is that just what
not with
is that
primates.
a myth? Is that like every spring everybody has a baby kind of thing?
Not with these creatures.
Is that
No.
okay? Because I'm looking
Most
into
primates are
Bambi.
just like us.
Oh God, that shows how good of an outdoorsman I am.
Well, I've got a follow-up question, and I've heard this before, and that is, do primates of any kind, and actually it was in regards to Bigfoot, but in the primate world, is there any such thing as nurseries where you will have kind of they gather together all the infants, and the females will just sort of act as nursemaids and keep an eye on them and that sort of thing, or do they stay strictly within their own family group and their mother, for example?
Well, you'll see with apes and monkeys that those babies, when they're born, they immediately attach to the female, and what I call the 5-point attachment. It's lips on the nipple, and then all 4 little legs attached to the mom. And boy, I tell you what, they can wrap those fingers in that mom's hair, and it's like you can't, it takes a very strong pull to get them away, because you'll see other females that decide, oh, I want to look at your kid, and then try to pull them off the mom, and it's absolutely, almost an impossibility to do that. And
how did the other moms react to that? When another female comes up, tries to take their baby?
Well, they don't like it most of the time, and now if it's a familiar female, because they run in familial groups, you'll have a granddam, and then she's got her daughters, and then you may have even granddaughters running in groups, and they form familial groups, and so. Grandmama comes up and wants to look at the baby. The daughter's not going to be so resistant to the grandmother looking at the baby. And there have even been instances where if something has happened to the daughter, that she might have died in childbirth, that grandmother or even a sister will come over there and take over the duties if they have milk, and they will care for that infant and raise it. Obviously some primates show more empathy for their children and grandchildren than even humans do, but the point is that they will either ride on their mom's chest or they will ride on their mom's back like they're riding a horse, and some of them will sit up there straight up there like, yeah, I like this, I'm riding on mom. And they will do that sometimes up till they're 6 or 7 months old, and even sometimes older, if mom will let them. But once they get out, you will see and I don't want to say this is like a nursery situation, but you will have the mothers just sitting around. I call the Buddha stance, where they're just all sitting there like, big fat mamas sitting there watching the kids play, and you'll have all these little kids out there in various stages of ages, and they're all running around playing. Now, if somebody gets out of hand and starts picking on a little one that they shouldn't be, yeah, mom will step up and usually, slap that one around a little bit. But mostly what they're watching out for is an attack by a male. And, so
they're all going to pitch in, and that's going to be a kind of a shared responsibility, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's you'll see a bunch of them sitting around. You don't have just one sitting there, watching the whole group. You'll have 3 or 4 mamas sitting around looking at them, and then but they're usually more looking for a big male to come along and maybe harm those babies versus a predator.
So it is kind of almost like a nursery situation. All right, I think we got time for one last very quick question. And this one is, my question is, Ron wants to know regarding the Sasquatch growls. Of the 4 different types, are the vocalizations identical, similar, or is there a way to differentiate between the growls? Hey, that's a type 4 over there, and that's a type 2.
We don't really know.
Well, we need to find out.
There's not enough information. There's not enough information to make any kind of determination like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when somebody hears a growl, they usually take heed.
You're not thinking about what type it is.
Right.
I've heard a growl up close. I thought, I'm leaving. That's all I thought.
Yes,
I'm getting
I
out
have
of here.
Oh my gosh! I just remember. Oh my gosh, her sitting in that truck, and then that god awful growl.
Well, we're just about out of time. In fact, we are out of time. Well, thanks, everyone. Milo, you have any final thoughts? I'm not sure if he's got his audio on. How about you, Forrest? Any final thoughts?
I don't think so. It's a really good question this time.
Milo?
I'm on.
Oh, there he is.
We always have good questions,
Yeah,
but I mean, they did have some really thought-provoking questions this time. Is what I meant.
Go ahead, Milo.
If I had to choose a weapon and round, what would I take?
Something big.
Well, I know that part. Are we talking high-powered rifle versus a shotgun, or what?
Well,
an elephant gun.
Yeah, a shotgun gives you knockdown power, but it doesn't do much else. Unless you shoot one in the eye, with a slug.
Yeah, okay.
Tom, how about you?
All right. So I'm going to say excellent questions. Keep them coming. And again, there's no such thing as a bad question. We love them all. They keep the topic alive. And speaking of staying alive, let's feed the algorithm and call it a day.
That's right. We can certainly use your likes and subscribe to the channel, folks. And stay tuned for the next show in a couple days.
In Bigfoot history, Chusca Mountains, Arizona, about 1967. Mrs. C.A. Cheeseman, Farmington, New Mexico, wrote to me that a Navajo family having a picnic saw an animal looking like a gorilla standing about 200 feet away watching them. It was on its hind legs and parted the underbrush with its hands. When they noticed it, it turned and walked off.
Welcome. This story is being brought to you by William Jevning and is being narrated by me, Jim Sower. The name of this story, Two Tales of the Yeho. Curious legend of the Kentucky mountains, 4 or 5 versions of this curious and strange legend come into my collection over a period of about 6 years, 1948 to 1954. from an isolated region of the Kentucky mountains. At first I did not know what to make of it, but having also collected a few versions of The Bear's Son, story minus the half-bear, half-man introduction, I guessed that this was the introduction now broken away and told separately. It now appears to be a distinct legend, since Dr. Archer Taylor refers me to the long search for American versions by Mr. Rudolph Atrocci. And now that I reflect on this item, I realize that it is not unique to Kentucky mountain folklore. During my youth in these mountains, it was not unusual to hear a rumor of some half-wild man, naked and hairy, being found in the woods, living close to animal state. This kind of Romulus Remus legend seems to stick in the minds of the folk, but how this particular legend made its way into eastern Kentucky is a mystery to me. The following version was taken down in pencil in 1950 from the lips of Lee Maggard, who lived in a small cabin on the south slope of the Pine Mountain Range near the small lumber town of Putney, Harlan County, Kentucky. He had heard it on Maggard's Branch, Leslie County, Kentucky. The Yeho. Once there was man out hunting. He got lost, and after a while he began to get hungry. He came to a big hole in the ground, and he thought he would venture down into it. He went down in there, and he found that the old Yeho lived in there. There was deer meat hanging up, and other food piled around the walls. The man was afraid at first, but Yeho didn't bother him, and he went toward that meat to get him some. The Yeho walked over and looked at the knife and said, "Yeho, Yeho," a time or two. He cut it off a piece of the meat, and he started eating it. Well, the man stepped over to the middle of the pit and took out his flint and built him up a fire. And the Yeho watched him and looked at the fire and at the flint and said, "Yeho, Yeho," again. The man put his meat on a stick and broiled him a nice piece and started eating it. The Yeho watched him and acted like he wanted a piece. The man cut it off a piece of the broiled meat and reached it over. And the Yeho commenced to eating it up and smacking its lips and saying, "Yeho, Yeho." Well, the man lived there with it a long time, and they got along all right. After so long, there was a young'un born to him, and it was half man and half Yeho. And the Yeho took such a liking to the man, it wouldn't let him leave. He got to wanting to get away and go back home. One day he slipped off, and the Yeho followed him and made him go back. Went on that way for a good while, but he picked him a good time and slipped away. This time he got to the shore where there was a ship ready to sail. He got on the ship, and he looked, and he saw the Yeho coming with a young'un. It screamed and hollered for him to come back, and when it saw he wasn't going to come, why, it just tore the baby in two and held it out, one half to him, and said, "Yeho, Yeho." He sailed on off and left it standing there. The version that Dr. Taylor refers to in my book, South from Hell for Sartin, is called The Origin of Man. Another version was given to me by this teller's grandson. It has the same title and contents, except that the Yeho has 6 children and tears them all in two and throws them after the embarked man. Another text, similar to the one given above, was accidentally erased from my tapes. The following text was recorded from Joe Couch, Appalachia, Virginia, in 1954. He had heard it from his people while he lived in Perry County, Kentucky. The Hairy Woman. One time I was prowling in the wilderness, wandering about, kindly got lost, and so weak and hungry I couldn't go. When it began to get cool, I found a big cave and crawled back in there to get warm. Crawled back in and come upon a leaf bed, and I dozed off to sleep. I heard an awful racket coming into that cave, and something come in and crawled right over me and laid down like a big old bear. It was a hairy thing, and when it laid down, it went chomp, chomp, chawing on something. I thought to myself, I'll see what it is and find out what it's eating. I reached over, and a hairy-like woman was there eating chestnuts. Had about a half a bushel there. I got me a big handful of them and went to chewing on them too. Well, in a few minutes, she handed me over another big handful, and I eat chestnuts until I was kindly full and wasn't hungry anymore. Directly, she got up and took off and out of sight. Well, I stayed on there till next morning, and she come in with a young deer. Brought it in, and with her big long fingernails she ripped its hide and skinned it, and then she sliced the good lean meat and handed me a bite to eat. I kindly slipped it behind me, afraid to eat it raw and afraid not to eat it, being she give it to me. She'd cut off big pieces of deer meat and eat it raw. Well, I laid back, and the other pieces she give me over as she eaten hers. She was going to see that I didn't starve. When she got gone again, I built up a little fire and broiled my meat. After being hungry for 2 or 3 days, it was good cooked. Yes, buddy. She come in while I had a fire. She come in while I had my fire built, broiling my meat, and she run right into that fire. She couldn't understand because it kindly burnt her a little. She jumped back and looked at me like she was going to run through me. I said, "Uh-oh, I'm going to get in trouble now." Well, it was cold and bad out, so I just stayed another night with her. She was a woman, but was right hairy all over. After several days, I learned her how to broil meat, and that fire would burn her. She got shy at the fire, and got so she liked broiled meat and wouldn't eat it raw anymore. We went on through the winter that way. She would go out carrying deer and bear. So I lived there about 2 years, and when we had a little kid, one side of it was hairy, and the other side was slick. I took a notion I'd leave there and go back home. I began to build me a boat to go away across the lake in. One time after I had left, I took a notion I'd slip back and see what she was doing. I went out to the edge of the cliff and looked down into the mountain, and it looked like 2 or 3 dozen of hairy people coming up the hill. They were all pressing her, and she would push them back. They wanted to come on up and come in. I was scared to death, afraid they was going to kill me. She made them go back and wouldn't let them come up and interfere. Well, I took a notion to leave one day when my boat was ready. I told her one day I was going to leave. She followed me down to my boat and watched me get ready to go away. She was crying, wanting me to stay. I said, "No, I'm tired of the jungles. I'm going back to civilization again, going back." When she knowed she wasn't going to keep me there, she just grabbed the little one and tore it right open with her nails, throwed me the hairy part, and she kept the slick side. That's the end of that story. This is the end of the story. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.